to strengthen democracy.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Sources in Iran say the crackdown on protesters has been intense over the past week. State media, however, shows a calm situation as the internet shutdown enters its fourth day, with over 500 people reported killed. Iran's supreme leader posts a message comparing US President Donald Trump to past tyrants who were overthrown. Ayatollah Khamenei says arrogant rulers never last in a veiled warning to Washington. President Donald Trump says Iran has reached out to negotiate after his threats of military action. He says the US is reviewing very strong options if protesters continue to be killed. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the Trump administration threatens legal action against him to gain influence over Federal Reserve interest rate policy. A top Republican senator warns the move undermines Justice Department credibility and vows to block future Fed appointments. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung meets Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi in Nara as Seoul balances ties with Beijing and Tokyo. The talks come amid rising China-Japan tensions with a focus on US, Japan, South Korea cooperation. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen begins a crucial court appeal in Paris that will decide if she can run in the 2027 presidential election. She's currently barred from public office after a conviction for misusing over €4 million in public funds. US Ambassador Sergio Gore says Washington and New Delhi continue active trade deal negotiations with another call set for Tuesday. He says President Trump and Prime Minister Modi can resolve differences despite strained ties over tariffs and Russian oil. Myanmar appears before the UN's top court over accusations of genocide against the Rohingya minority. The case filed by Gambia centers on a 2017 military operation that Myanmar denies violated international law. We start this hour with ongoing developments on the situation in Iran, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has strongly condemned the crackdown on protesters in the country. Speaking during his visit to India, Merz described the actions as disproportionate and brutal, emphasizing that they reflect weakness rather than strength. He called for the violence to stop and urged Iranian authorities to respect the rights of those protesting. Merz made clear that the use of force against civilians is unacceptable and must come to an end immediately. Of course, this is the ongoing situation in Iran where over 500 protesters have reported to have been killed by rights groups. The world is awaiting to see if the United States intervenes. Donald Trump says that the US is considering very strong options to intervene in Iran. Merz there in New Delhi expressing his dissatisfaction with the Iranian regime's actions in attempting to quash the protests. The US-based rights group, the Harana, says nearly 500 people have been killed since the crackdown, and Trump has threatened to hit the country very hard if people are killed further. This, of course, isn't a flash protest. It's potentially the largest sustained challenge to the Islamic regime in decades. Protests, of course, happened before through the likes of 2019, 2022, among other years. Of course, authorities imposed a nationwide crackdown, which is now entering its 80th hour, and this nationwide shutdown has choked the flow of information to the outside world, and communications have remained restricted both inside Iran and its access to the outside of it. Of course, a lot of international actors have displayed their dismay towards the actions of the Iranian regime and its dealing with these protesters. Okay, now joining us is Professor Georgi Toleraya, a professor at the Russia Academy of Science. He joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Toleraya. Of course, this situation is developing by the hour. New information is restricted due to this internet blackout, which has reached its 80th hour. Donald Trump, of course, threatening to impose what he calls very strong measures against the Iranian regime in support of the protesters. How do you think this may develop? Do you think we are witnessing a potential historic event here?
I've been last to Iran maybe 8 years ago. And already at that time I could feel that the society is ripe for changes. You know, the population is not very happy with the power, with the political power and Islamist power. And so they want some changes, and these changes looks they're coming now. I hope that won't be violent, that the change won't be violent. There won't be a coup d'etat or some kind of abrupt regime change with bloodshed. There is a possibility for evolutionary reform, but this reform is badly needed. I'm not sure whether the Ayatollahs are ready, prepared to carry on these long-needed reforms, both economic and maybe ideological. But I believe there are forces in the current Iranian leadership that can do this without outside interference. And I hope that the scenario will be more evolutionary than revolutionary. That's what I hope for, but as you mentioned, the situation changes hour by hour. So now we are at the verge of either we have a real bloodshed, or we'll have the coup d'etat, or we will have some, in a few days, some more evolutionary development. That's how I see it.
The prospect of foreign intervention, of course, is concerning a lot of people, given the multiple methods in which the United States might intervene. Of course, we saw the intervention of Nicolas Maduro. That was compelling, to say the least. What kind of intervention, if any, what might we see from the United States if they were to move forward with that?
I've seen the reports about plans to intervene in the cyber sphere, to make some cyber attacks on Iran. And although the internet is now mostly not working, but there are still possibilities for this kind of intervention. I don't think we'll see American boots on the ground, because that would really be a disaster, I think, both for US and for Iran. And I don't think that US is ready for such a deployment. But they are going to finance the opposition. They're going to do something to overthrow the regime. This is, of course, also a possibility that there will be some kind of violent clashes, including those headed by opposition, financed and supported by the US.
Professor Toleraya, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. Of course, we'll continue to bring our viewers all the updates coming out of Iran as soon as we get them. But we move over to The Hague for our next story. And Gambia has told the International Court of Justice that Myanmar deliberately targeted the Rohingya Muslim minority, making their lives a nightmare and committing acts aimed at destroying the community. The landmark case was filed by Gambia in 2019 with backing from organizations of Islamic cooperation. It accuses Myanmar of genocide during a 2017 military offensive in Rakhine state that forced at least 730,000 Rohingya to flee to Bangladesh. where there were reported killings, mass rape and arson. Gambia's Justice Minister Darwa Jallow said the Rohingya were simple people seeking peace, but Myanmar denied genocide, calling the military campaign a counter-terrorism operation. A UN fact-finding mission previously concluded the offensive included genocidal acts. The hearing, spanning 3 weeks in The Hague, will allow Rohingya victims to testify in closed sessions for the first time. Joining us now is Noor Aziza. She is from the Rohingya Maya Funyo network. She joins us live from Sydney. Thank you very much, Noor, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. This has been a long time coming. What are the main legal arguments here that Gambia is presenting against Myanmar in this case?
The Gambia argues that Myanmar has breached the Genocide Convention by committing and failing to prevent genocide against the Rohingya. This includes mass killing, systematic sexual violence. In 2017, more than 25,000 Rohingya women were raped, the burning of villages, and policies designed to make Rohingya life impossible and to vanish Rohingya from our own ancestral homeland in Arakan, Rakhine State in Burma, Myanmar. Now, the argument also states that the genocide did not end in 2017. The genocide shifted, but it continues. Rohingya in Myanmar are still living in apartheid-like conditions and are still living in genocidal conditions. The case highlights that Myanmar has not investigated or held perpetrators accountable and continues the practices that sustain the destruction of my people.
And what challenges exist, Noor, in proving the crimes committed against the Rohingya people in court?
Now, in court, in 2020, the ICJ provided provisional measures to the Myanmar military. Did they listen? No, they did not. So unfortunately, what we are seeing is the ongoing campaign of mass atrocities by other actors inside Burma, Myanmar, such as the Arakan Army. So I know that this case is not going to fix everything or resolve everything, but it gives us a little bit of leverage to tell the wider world about the plight of the Rohingya. Often we are labelled as a forgotten genocide, and we are changing that and shifting that. But some of the challenges in court is that the Myanmar military are prolonging this case by pausing and restarting. So we have been waiting for a couple of years. The case started in 2019. Mass displacement is still happening as I'm speaking right now. Genocide is still happening. So what we owe is justice to the victims.
And if the ICJ rules against Myanmar, what consequences could the country realistically face?
A ruling against Myanmar would be a formal legal determination that the state violated the Genocide Convention. So that would require Myanmar to change its conduct to protect Rohingya inside Myanmar, end the discriminatory laws, end the apartheid state's conditions, practice, preserve evidence and comply with international obligations. So the ICJ ruling would empower survivors, but it would also strengthen legal pathways if this does happen.
Thank you very much, Noor Aziza, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much for taking the time. We now move on and over to Europe's eastern front, and fresh attacks on Ukraine's energy network have been reported overnight, with Russia accused of striking key power facilities across the country's south and north. Ukraine's energy ministry has said electricity was cut in 7 regions, including Odesa, Kharkiv, Donetsk and Kiev, after infrastructure was damaged. In the southern Odesa region, energy sites and administrative buildings were hit, leaving several towns and parts of the city without any power. Emergency repair crews were deployed overnight. Officials have also confirmed damage in the Chernihiv, where power repairs are being delayed due to security concerns. In Kyiv and surrounding areas, emergency outages are in effect as authorities work to stabilise the grid amid cold weather and continued strikes. Professor Tolaraya joins us once again. Of course, we are in the midst of a European winter right now, where temperatures in both Russia and Ukraine are reaching sub-zero temperatures. The impact on the civilian population, of course, with the striking of these infrastructure, the energy infrastructure in particular, is rife. What can you tell us about the targeting of energy infrastructure and why Russia is sending, along with Ukraine, so many drones, so many missiles to target this in such a time of year that will affect the population in such a way?
Well, it goes both ways. They're not usually reported in the world media, but at the same time, we've got lots of drones attacks on Russia proper. And I've got the relatives in the city of Voronezh, and they reported this night that they had lots of sirens going off and lots of attack of drones. Several persons, at least one woman was killed, and there are lots of fires in the city. And also Ukrainians are attacking by drones our oil bases and things like that. And Russia is deliberately attacking the energy infrastructure of Ukraine in order to minimize its military potential and production potential of drones and other armament, and to enforce the negotiations to reach some kind of a peace deal. Ukrainians don't want to. They want to continue Zelensky. Zelensky wants to continue war, so he gets what he wants.
Professor Tolorai, is there still appetite to keep on fighting in Russia? Of course, the advances... No,
there's never been appetite for fighting, because we said from the start that if Ukrainians would just recognize the reality on the ground, the reality that Ukraine is broken in two, has been divided into two parts, in Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine, which is Russia, which is a Russian-speaking territory, then the war would have been over long ago.
Okay, Professor Tolorai, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called terrorism the ultimate and serious threat to humanity, stressing that India and Germany will work together to combat this global menace. Modi made the remarks alongside German Chancellor Friedrich Merz during a joint press conference in Ahmedabad, part of Merz's maiden two-day visit to India. People-to-people ties were also emphasised, including cultural initiatives, sports cooperation and integration of Germany's National Maritime Museum with India's National Maritime Heritage Museum. Let's listen into the statements made by the Indian Prime Minister.
भारत और जर्मनी सहमत है कि ग्लोबल चैलेंजेस से निपटने के लिए ग्लोबल इंस्टीट्यूशंस में सुधार अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण है। यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल में सुधार के लिए G4 के माध्यम से हमारा संयुक्त प्रयास इसी सोच का प्रमाण है। आज हमने यूक्रेन और गाजा सहित कई वैश्विक और क्षेत्रीय मुद्दों पर विस्तार से चर्चा की। भारत सभी समस्याओं और विवादों के शांतिपूर्ण समाधान का पक्षधर रहा है और इस दिशा में किए जा रहे सभी प्रयासों का समर्थन करता है। हम एकमत है कि आतंकवाद पूरी मानवता के लिए एक गंभीर खतरा है। भारत और जर्मनी इसके विरुद्ध एकजुट होकर पूरी दृढ़ता से लड़ाई जारी रखेंगे।
Bilateral trade between the two countries has crossed $50 million with over 2,000 German companies operating in India. Joining us now is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert. He joins us live from New Delhi. The significance of this meeting, Dr. Kochar, what does this say about bilateral relations between Germany and India?
Thomas, good evening to you. It's a very, very welcome sign to see European countries coming closer to India. And first it was France, we had and Great Britain, and now we are seeing Germany. So it speaks of India's stature in world geopolitics. And a German chancellor coming to India is always a pleasure to have him as our guest here. And the significance, as Prime Minister Modi, we just heard, uh, counter terrorism, I think, is a major concern for all the world today. We saw what happened in Australia. We see what is actually happening in the world over. Uh, this problem is not limited to one region only, and therefore it requires the you approach of a combination of factors, and each country must commit itself to a pledge to tackle terrorism in a very firm manner, and those who are perpetrators of terrorism should be condemned here. So I think that's a strong statement being made by the Prime Minister. Apart from that, Germany and India have a very resilient trade, and we would like to build up upon this to have secure and resilient supply chains, because today we have seen in this world, uh, uh, especially after the World War II, we have seen how the supply chains have been impacted by various incidents. For example, if there was an incident in the Middle East, we saw the problem in the Red Sea and the supply chain getting impacted. The problem in Tehran also now, and Iran also now will also see supply chains getting impacted. So I think this is one area, and especially we have seen in the COVID times also. So Germany, European Union, and the G7 countries can come together and build up this resiliency. Next important aspect is geopolitical and economic implications of this visit. We would like to see a review of the multilateral institutions, and I think India and Germany can make a lot of difference. I believe some talks will also be there, how the reforms can be initiated in the United Nations and make it more relevant to ensure that peace and tranquility is there in this world. And it is a very strategic partnership we have with Germany now, and it is not diplomatic rhetoric. It is two well-meaning countries are getting together, and the real test will be that whether this alignment culminates in a stronger action or a stronger message to the multilateral forums around the world. And we would also see at the same time, whenever highest dignitary of a state comes, we would also like to see some kind of trade agreements also taking place, especially the post-Trump scenario we have seen has impacted India's supply chains, has impacted India's certain areas like agriculture, garment industry, and automobile industry, and therefore we would like to see a greater collaboration between Germany and India, especially in terms of apparel and accessories, and the import structure which we have, where India imports from Germany in terms of machinery, aircrafts, electrical, electronic equipment, optical equipment. We would like to see a joint ventures coming in, because when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think our aim is that we must bring in the foreign direct investment into India, and I think this should pave a ground with better understanding and trust between the countries to bring in a foreign direct investment into India.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Kochhar, thank you very much for joining us here on News Expo. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And we now move on, and some news from the tech world. And India has proposed requiring smartphone makers to share source code with the government and make several software changes as part of a raft of security measures, prompting behind-the-scenes opposition from giants like Apple and Samsung. The tech companies have countered that the package of 83 security standards which would also include a requirement to alert the government to major software updates, lacks any global precedent and risks revealing proprietary details. The plan is part of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's efforts to boost security of user data as online fraud and data breaches increase in the world's second largest smartphone market, with nearly 750 million phones. The Indian proposals also require companies to make software changes to allow pre-installed apps to be uninstalled and to block apps from using cameras and microphones in the background to avoid malicious usage. India has proposed requiring smartphone makers to share source code with the government and make several software changes as part of a raft of security measures, prompting behind-the-scenes opposition from giants like Apple and Samsung. The tech companies have countered that the package of 83 security standards, which would also include a requirement to alert the government to major software updates, lacks any global precedent and risks revealing proprietary details. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.